So I think we'll wait a minute or two to let the attendees join.
Okay, excellent.
Because we have a lot of attendees for this session.
Maybe we can start to talk because I can't stand the silence.
Let's start. I think, yeah.
So my importance then, you know.
Okay, good afternoon, dear guests, dear participants, and welcome to the fourth plenary session of the PoSoCoMeS conference. My name is Ksenia Robbe. I'm working at the University of Groningen, and I'll be moderating this conversation. And it is my great pleasure and honor to welcome two brilliant writers, Katja Petrowskaja and Maria Stepanova, whose texts resonate across the world in many different languages and spark much interest and acclaim. Thanks so much for joining our conference and our discussions of the socialist memory today. So
thank you so much for inviting us.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I'll begin by introducing you, and then we'll move to the questions which I prepared, a few tricky questions. And then after that, I'll open the screens to everyone. So for the audience, for the attendees, a reminder to please use the Q&A section, the Q&A option, and not the chat, because we will not be able to watch both sections, both tabs here. And please try to keep your questions short, so there is an opportunity for more questions to be asked and engaged with. So I'll begin with introductions, even though our guests today do not really need any. So I'll keep them very, very short. Katja Petrowskaja is a writer and journalist. She was born in Kiev, studied at the University of Tartu, and received her PhD from the Russian State University of Humanities in Moscow. Since 1999, so 20 years and a bit more even, she has lived in Berlin, and she has been working for Russian and German language media. Since 2011, she is a columnist at the Frankfurter Allgemeine Sonntagszeitung. And most importantly for our discussion, she's the author of a bestseller novel, Vielleicht Esther, Maybe Esther, which was written in German and published in 2014. The novel has received great critical and readerly acclaim, and has received a number of awards, among which the most important I will just mention is the Ingeborg Bachmann Prize, which is the most important award for German language literature. And last but not least, the novel has been translated into more than 20 languages. Maria Stepanova is a poet, essayist, and journalist. She was born, grew up, and still based in Moscow. She graduated from the Moscow Literary Institute, and since then has published 10 poetry collections and 3 books of essays, and is a recipient of several Russian and international literary awards. Her documentary novel Pameti Pameti, In Memory of Memory, was published in 2017 and already received several important prizes, among them Big Book Prize, NOS Prize, and recently Brücke Berlin Prize. She is also importantly a founder and editor-in-chief of the platform, the daily called Taru, which is a crowd-funded online daily covering cultural, social, political life in Russia and the world. Most of you are certainly familiar with it and are following it regularly. So among these different paths that you are taking in your work, I will focus in this discussion on your big books. And I'm not calling them novels, and it's difficult to call them novels, but the question of genre is of course extremely interesting. So how they have been called, how they have been framed by you and publishers. So what I found interesting is that Katja's German original of the book was subtitled Stories, and at least one of the publications in English was subtitled Family Novel. So there is already a difference in genre there. And Maria has given her book a very interesting definition of romance, which is in English, the word refers us to, among other things, to Freud and family romance there, but also to the very lyrical, personal style and form of the narrative, architecture of the narrative. And so there is this tension and correspondence, non-correspondence between the English and Russian term, which is also something we might want to discuss. Both novels are about families, but also not only about families. They are about search for some kind of rootedness, an attempt to reconstruct family stories or attend and take care of the dead. To find out what happened to the deceased family members, what existed behind the screens of family myths and silences. And this search takes the narrators on journeys in time and in space across practically the whole of Europe, places where their family members lived and where some of them were murdered in Babi Yar, in the battles of Second World War, or survived in Romanian camps. So these are all the topics that come up during our conference. So these are truly European narratives and narratives of cosmopolitan Europe, at the same time told from perspectives that have been partially neglected in this globalized field, perspectives of Soviet and post-Soviet experience. But perhaps the main reasons that we really wanted to have this conversation with you during the conference is not only because your texts refer to these plots, which many papers in the conference talk about. So Second World War, Babi Yar, Mauthausen, the siege of Leningrad. So this as well, and I'm sure there will be questions about that, but also because your texts reflect on the nature and practices of memory and the role of memory in our contemporary societies, which are obsessed with the past. And this is also a topic that we're discussing during the conference. And they're about how I think the specific languages of telling and not telling stories in Eastern Europe can be linked to global or globalized languages of remembering. And I think literature has a special, a significant role and can do a very important work in creating such languages and forms of memory. So these are some of the questions that I would like, very, very general ones that I would like us maybe to return to at some point. But now I will start with more specific questions. So the first one is about languages and readerships. So your books were written in 2 different languages, maybe Esther in German, In Memory of Memory in Russian, and probably you have different readers in mind as you were writing, but then the books have been translated and they are circulating already outside of these original fields and original conversations. And so they seem to resonate on 2 levels. On the one hand, they convey very, very special experiences of daily life, of daily rituals and idioms of life in Soviet and post-Soviet contexts. And on the other level, through their very broad cultural references, the spaces that the narrators visit, and this backdrop of catastrophic 20th century, they share a lot with narratives from other cultures and other places of the world. So I was wondering how, so first of all, what kind of readers you had in mind when you were writing, and then how you see your text working at these different levels, can be called local and global, local or transnational, how you react to maybe sometimes unintended framings and readings of your texts. And there is, of course, a big temptation, I think, among international readers to read them as narratives of post-memory. So this term by Marianne Hirsch, which relates to how 2nd and 3rd generation descendants of survivors, and so she particularly talks about the Holocaust, but it has been already extended to further context and experience. So how 2nd and 3rd generations of survivors try to patch up stories about their parents and grandparents, about their own relation to the stories. So to what extent do you think it is relevant? It is, this notion is applicable to your text or not? And maybe lastly, if you want to address this question, is this, can we speak of some specific post-socialist post-memory? Or is it such a globalized notion that it doesn't make sense to localize it?
So do you give us 20 hours to answer?
So let's just
yeah, that is definitely enough questions to keep us busy for this hour and a half. But well, let's start with the first 2, I suppose. Katja, will you?
No, you will be the first.
Okay. So, well, first of all, it is rather problematic for me to be speaking about the potential readership of the book I was having in mind while I've been writing it, because I didn't have any vision of my future reader to be, because I was trying to solve a question, to solve a purpose of my own, and a very intimate one. It was something very, very private. And what I was trying to do, and what I've been trying to do since my early childhood, was writing a book about my deceased relatives in a way it could be, well, relevant and detailed, and at the same time that could please them. There is an essay of Joseph Brodsky that is titled, I may be wrong, I may be misquoting, but the idea is, well, in Russian translation, it is поклониться тени, to pay homage to the shadow. And that's what I've been trying to do. I was trying to reconnect with them, and to create a certain space where I could say for for an unnamed viewer, not a reader maybe, some relics in the same way one is hiding a leaf in a forest. I wasn't trying to communicate, I was building, maybe not a shrine, but a sort of a space. So I didn't exactly suppose to have a reader, not to mention international reader.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. Katja?
I want to always say, and я как Masha. I'm like, no, not this time. Actually, I haven't been thinking about readers as well because of usual egocentrism. But actually, my case is a pretty immigrant case. I think I wouldn't have written a book of this type anyway if I still stayed in Kiev or in Moscow. I think so. And I think just this move to Berlin helped me, or help, maybe it's not the correct word. I was really stumbling over the history all the time, and in Berlin it's not difficult because the war conserved the traces of the war. And if you want or not, you are dealing with a normal life with this beautiful Berlin understatement, always in frame of history. And actually, I was thinking all the time what I'm doing here and why I'm stumbling on this history and this post-socialist stories, or just stories of also the stories of the war and the stories of the peace from late Soviet epoch were developing in my vision as if it was this kind of developing of photography, you know, slowly but surely. I saw them. And I think also it was a matter of language, because we talked many times with Masha about this kind of very strange mixture of abundance and deficit, which marks the moment of start. And I think for me, there were many moments of start, why I started to write this book. And one of them was death of my aunt, this absolutely amazing, actually, I saw this photo after her death. So when you're stuck just because you're in deficit, it's not only about this kind of telling many stories you have in your heritage. Actually, just because you asked already about language, I would say a few words. I wrote this book in German out of many pragmatic reasons, because I live here and I try to convert my over emotional stories in German, which is not always a success, I have to admit. So it was actually a search for, it was not search of readers in this, of course, in a way, maybe, but it was most of all a search of a place of resonance, a place of where I can talk at all. And it was a very actually small place. And I wrote a book maybe for two friends of mine who live here in Germany, and who knows Russian, therefore they would have possibly understand what I'm doing. But actually all this thinking about 20th century and about losses of 20th century and about traces of your families, connected to this idea of loss of a language. So in a way, I wrote this book in German to make my way very hard, not to get it like, not to step in this kind of automatical memoir chatting about my family. So actually my family was not that important. My family gave me a right to step into this side. But this loss of language, it was a sort of сопромат, сопротивление материала, so actually resistance of material which I needed to gain the right to talk, something like that. Yeah.
Yes, I find it, yeah, very interesting, both the differences here. So talking to the dead, paying homage to the dead as a very, very intimate process, and also an intimacy of a different kind with language. But also this resistance in both cases.
Yes, and I suppose that that is rather a common thing when it comes to memory, that you are always starting with a void, with this feeling of loss that is so general that you are searching and finding means to overcome it somehow, anyhow. And there is a number of ways to be dealing with it, but still you're starting from, not from the blank space, but from something that is constantly felt like a gap, like a loss, like a huge hole that is so necessary to cover.
And giving it form and giving it new language against the resistance of the existing language.
Maybe simply the thing is about finding the fabric to connect the edges. And that is the most important thing to make life more bearable again once over.
And that relates to the notion of post-memory, I think, at least the way I see. Yeah, so connecting, repairing the fabric. So, and you refer to this notion explicitly in your text. So this was something that you were definitely thinking through as you were writing. So to what extent is this post-Holocaust or global context of post-memory relevant to you now that you have finished the novel and it's out there?
Well, I suppose I've been starting. Well, it was a lucky coincidence because when I was researching for my book, I've somehow stumbled upon Marianne Hirsch's book, and I was amazed by the precision of what she describes and the way it might be applicable to my own experience. And still it was kind of a problem for me because, well, here she's writing, well, she is known as someone who is working in this field of post-Holocaust studies. So what she is writing of, what she is describing is a very precise and limited number of events, number of subjects. And when she is describing, and she's a scientist, so when she's describing this post-memory phenomenon, she is choosing her words very carefully. And she is describing something that may be applied to a number of post-Holocaust, well, Holocaust survivors who belong to the second or third generation. And that this is it. But I have a deep feeling that the same sensibility, the same sensations might be describing a much more wide picture. In fact, it is pretty global. And I suppose that after all the massacres, all the catastrophic losses of the 20th century, in a way, every single human being may be speaking about her or his life as a sudden miracle. We are existing by pure chance. It happened so that we've managed, that our grandparents managed to get out of the mess alive. And so I would say carefully, but still insistently, that we are all maybe regarded as survivors of the 20th century. And so this sensibility, this obsession with the past, this feeling that the distant past the events that happened some half a century or 70 years ago are much more important, much more insistent, much more alive, that the lives we are leading here in our everyday reality, it is so very common. And I was encountering the traces of this sensibility all around Europe and further. It is quite common and well, a bit instructive, I suppose.
Thanks so much, Maria. Katja, how do you think about post-memory and whether it is applicable to your book and your material and your intentions?
I was not thinking about post-memory, but post-memory was thinking about me. And in the case, actually, I read this book of Mariana Hirsch, actually three, after I wrote mine. Maybe also because I was not really dealing with this discourse of memory when I wrote my book. I wrote it out of completely different circumstances, and they were dealing with this. I already said, with this move to Berlin, and with regarding this strange landscape of bloodland, so to say, between Berlin and Kiev, going there and back. So actually, I was dealing with this if the concept of common landscape, and I was talking to real people, and I live in this country, and actually, I was a few times really astonished by the fact that maybe it's harder to be the ancestor of Wehrmacht soldier than to be the granddaughter of survivor. And it was a very interesting experience for me. And maybe this kind of writing in German was an attempt to avoid a sort of Jewish bonus, you know, like we are the champions of survival or whatever. To get rid of this kind of role play between, of course, historically regarded, it's very important to know who, but I don't think that a German woman of my age is worse or better than I just because this historical context. So actually, this attempt to, it's not really to change the sides. It's actually German, writing in German plays for me a role of a double life. Maybe that's the survival, to have the ambition to write in a language my relatives could have written, and even more. That it would have been possible for a German to write this book. So in this way, German language is the main hero of my book. It's a fictitious hero of my book.
Yeah, and I think it's really space. It's space in between rather than changing sides. It's being here and there.
Yes, and it's actually concerning memory. It was also for me an attempt to think through all deficits and truth of the myth of the Second World War, or Great Patriotic War in Soviet Union, of this like stories of my family or people around my family, and this almost neurotic and very actually attractive culture of memory in Germany, which really changed this country dramatically. And it's not, it's just not, I'm really almost sentimental talking about that, but somehow it's really incredible that Berlin turned to be the most peaceful city in Europe. And it's noticeable not only by half or para or semi-Jewish Russian, Ukrainian, and so on. It's very noticeable by Israelis and many other people. So actually, it's something happened here, and my book is also dealing with this question, actually, why it was possible to say we here concerning not concerning common guilt, but concerning common responsibility or belonging to history. And it was not possible to do it in Soviet Union. Actually, we were very, very close to that in the beginning of 90s. So actually, it's about all these levels of actually, I was not dealing with remembering. I was dealing with telling the story, and I think it's a principal thing, because telling the story has something to do with a concrete переживание, which is also Erlebnis in German, and in English we have only to live through. It's a bit constructed, so but really thinking is deeply connected to the language, and even the idea of Erfahrung, experience, because it has something to do with fahren, which is already going. It's already a sort of travelogue.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Yeah, and I think it's really a fascinating case what happened with memory and memory culture in Germany, but at the same time, even very, very developed and sophisticated and elaborate culture of memory can get stuck at a certain point. And what your narrative does is really takes it somewhere else, doing a step into some other direction. And I think this also takes me to the next question, which is about fiction and non-fiction aspects of your narratives, of your texts. So they came out and they speak within this context of constant politicization and appropriations of memory and really memory boom. So we live in these times when the future is very uncertain, and so we are looking for all the answers in the past in different ways. And in this context, memory comes to be instrumentalized for political ends very often in very crude ways. Your texts are extremely different from that. And so and they critique this tendency explicitly or performatively. So I wonder how you see your text working in this field, which is saturated by memory. So everything is about memory, or everything is about the past, and is very often politically manipulated. How do you see the possibilities of fiction, memory and fiction in this politicized context?
Well, I'm not so sure that the term fiction is working anymore as well as it was working half a century ago, because and especially if you're working with the past, because I suppose that while the past, the events and people of the past are more and more are being turned into a commodity or into a working tool in someone else's political or economic game. All you can do is to be very precise and very cautious with every step you're taking towards the past. And I suppose that almost every brand of fictionalizing the past, of reimagining it, reinventing it, is somehow robbing the dead of the reality of their own lives. They are rapidly losing the rights they used to have. And I suppose that something has to be done about that. That maybe we need a declaration of the rights of the dead, Maybe we need to be to have political rallies that would help the dead to regain their dignity. And for me, maybe that's the most important term, the dignity of the dead. And if you are writing about certain people, certain event, I suppose you have to constantly ask yourself if you're doing the right thing. If you are somehow changing the scale, changing the words, if you are allowing yourself to be imagining something, does it violate the privacy of the person you're writing about? And I suppose the only answer is you have to be very conscious all the time. Sorry for the dog.
The dog is agreeing with you. And it's a quiet. Yes, I really love this. Maybe Katja,
yes, I can.
My apologies.
You're excused forever. Actually, I've been always asked what I created in my book, what is fictitious, because I truly have few stories which are completely incredible. Incredible? No, not credible. Incredible. It's not very modest. I'm sorry. I'm amazing, my mother used to say. Yes, so she always mixed the words up. I have a story I really did experience in Babi Yar when I was working through Babi Yar in the places where massacre took place. There is a small forest and ravine, and I really lost my way. And there I met a group of young people playing in the Lord of Rings, beautifully dressed. And I asked them about the church, how to get to the church and to psychiatric clinic, and actually patients of psychiatric clinic were the first who were killed in Babi Yar. And they told me, Angel will help you. And actually only afterwards I realized that there is no angel in Lord of the Rings, but they sent me a beautiful guy, and he showed me the way. I mean, it's really almost kitschy, but I experienced that. So actually it was very problematic to write this story, because I really felt it's like too much. Yeah. And then at the end of my book, and it was actually the last visit to Kiev, when I was looking for my first home place, actually my birthplace in Kiev, in the street Institutskaya, I met a woman dressed in white, and she was like a ghost, and she told me, you are visiting this place pretty often. And I was like, I haven't been here for years. And she said, it doesn't matter. So it means she knew I was thinking about this place, so she knew where I'm standing. So it was like absolutely crazy. And I put her on the end of my book, thinking that, yeah, I am really very, very often in this place of my birth. And it was in the Institutskaya street. And I put a point in the November 2013. And this Institutskaya street is in Kiev. And it was the beginning of Maidan. And 2 months later, 100 people were killed on this street, just from my house, from my birthplace down the street. So I don't know where is the literature and where is the fiction, where is the history. And actually I wrote a book about the forgotten place, Kiev, in a way. So I think that not only concerning the past and reconstructing the past, but actually our perception is fictitious because it consists of everything we read, everything we saw, everybody we met. So what is true about the joke? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. So in this case, yeah, and maybe the most important for me, which was a mark and the title of my book, Vielleicht Esther, maybe Esther, кажется Esther. I don't know what was the name of my great-grandmother who was killed on the 29th of September, the first day of Babi Yar, just next to her house in Lutheranska Street or Engel Street. And in German, it's again Angel. It's not only Friedrich Engels. And actually, it was my road to the school, and I didn't know that. So it means I crossed every day this place of your death, and it's also actually talking about memory. Topography is a very important thing, and I was even thinking, did it play a specific role for me that I grew up in Kiev, which was occupied by Germans, and I know all this topography, and my house was so it's like, is it a sort of privilege in comparison to people from Moscow, or what? So do I have more rights for something? So it's really a very strange thing. But turning back to Vielleicht Esther, I was talking to my father and actually reconstructing this strange day of 29th of September 41. I knew that few members of my family were killed in Babi Yar, and suddenly, really very late, like 8 years ago, my father told my husband. My husband got the best stories from my parents, who never kept silence. They told many stories, so I was really, really angry on them. So my father said, I had also one grandmother who perished in Babi Yar, but she didn't get there. So но она туда не дошла. And I was really astonished, and I asked my father about circumstances of this day, and he told me that she was old, and they left her aside in the apartment when they been evacuated. And so when the announcement for all Jews to gather in a certain crossroad, I'm really translating, yeah. Были расклеены, я не знаю, как это сказать. So were printed and were announced in the city. She tried to go down, and she was killed on the corner of her house. And actually, I asked my father what was her name, and he said, "Кажется, Esther." He said, perhaps Esther. And I was like, what? You were 9 years old. You lived with your babushka and you don't know your name. And he said, yeah, her parents, my parents called her mama and I called her babushka. And one of my grandmothers was Esther. So maybe she was Esther. And so it was a moment for me when I thought, do I have right to call her Esther? And actually, this maybe, or this perhaps, is not a relativity of history. So it doesn't mean that 29th of September didn't take place, or she wasn't killed this way. I reconstructed because I read like 2 kilometers of text on this day just to have the right to see this step, to see this maybe 30 seconds. Is it a fiction? I think it's a very, very important point Masha mentioned, to ask yourself, do I have right? And so this this maybe Esther is exactly the modality of truth. So I have to admit that maybe Esther existed in reality, but Esther only maybe. And I do not have any right, as I am, maybe there are some other people, certainly, to make the step and to accept the probability of something I cannot accept. So actually, the whole search is has to be aware of modality of your vision. And sometimes the step you cannot make depends on lack of documents. Sometimes it's just your spiritual concern because you cannot enter some sites to watch people deprived of dignity. So it's also very, and now I forgot the word целомудрие. Maybe I've never used it in English. So c'est tout.
Yeah, but thanks so much on this reflection. I think it's really, really important and key, and that really also resonates with what Maria was saying about the dignity of the deceased and the right to speak to them, and in what kind of mode and what kind of modality, how do we do that? And I think that this modality of subjunctive mood in your text, your Katja, is really something that is performed and reflected. Yes, you're muted.
Okay, about subjectivity. Actually, I think it's also maybe something Masha mentioned, how to deal with this past, or we're dealing actually looking in the past, or people who live in the past, we're dealing with people who used to have a future. So actually we are looking at them and we see this kind of predictability of history. All these catastrophes, and that some survived, some not. And it's like already done, it's predictable in the description, but in the moment of dealing with them, so that's what was for me a concern, how to slow down the moment of death, and how to deal with this subjunctive mood all the time, as if the survival is possible, even for people for whom it was not possible. That was for me maybe a moment of dignity, not to accept the predictability of history, because it's and actually my main story about fiction is ficus or ficus, and I don't know, do we have 3 minutes? Because it's really hard to talk. Marsha told this, heard this story already 100 times, so I don't know.
Go ahead. Yeah.
But ficus, and actually in German ficus, is the main hero of my family, because of the ficus. My father was evacuated in August 41 from Kiev, and actually it's the story about a big truck which was standing just next to the house of my father in Engel Street, and it was full with other people and filled with bags and all that, and there was also a ficus in this truck. And my grandfather just put this ficus down and put his sons on the place of ficus. And that's the story how my father was evacuated from Kiev, and therefore he survived the Holocaust. And also, I don't like this word, I'm sorry. When I was talking again and again to my father, everything was there, but ficus disappeared. And I was really like almost shocked, because my father told me the story that he was actually saved from the German troops just because of Ficus who perished. And my father just forgot. So the story is about that. It's absolutely impossible to clear why I am focusing on this ficus, which is not existing because my father already forgot about this ficus. And is this ficus a fictitious thing, or is fiction derived from ficus, or vice versa, and all that? So, and actually, the result of this search is that the fiction is survival. But the point in the whole thing that this has nothing to do with theory. It's really a real story about ficus. So I don't know, maybe it had to be gerань, or I don't know, palm or whatever. But in the story, it was ficus. And the last point, and then I will keep silence forever. It's a matter of German language, because in this story was told me in Russian. And just imagine ficus and fictia. So actually fictia is something completely, it's a constructed lie and all that. And in German, you just transport this story in German. And actually it was one of the stories I really felt like it has to be in German. It was suddenly ficus. And Surkamp, publishing house Surkamp allowed me to write not in Latin, not with C, but with K. So I did it in German. I did this mistake to legitimate fiction. So, and it's a completely different story. So, and this story couldn't be in Russian. So in a way, this story of salvation could function only on the language of the enemy. So which is really pretty insane. Okay, I keep silent.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful example of how the text performs this crossing of boundaries, how it finds a new mode, a mode of making meaning. So, and the beautiful thing about this episode with ficus, the fiction of ficus, is that it is this material object through which a larger meaning is made, but also so many people can imagine this object and can associate with it, who lived and didn't live through these times, or also from other cultures. So it's so relatable, and this forms a different modality of speaking about this, the horror and the catastrophe of the Holocaust, for example, or other episodes.
But it is also a story of choice in a number of ways. And it gives us a lot of things to grasp when it comes to the subjectivity that is standing behind every conscious and unconscious decision the storyteller is taking, the writer does, and of course the people who were blessing her with her stories. And that is an interesting thing, how objects, not subjects, are achieving a certain subjectivity, how they become something that is capable of speaking for themselves. A fictional ficus that is a survivor of history, or at least of memory, as well as the kid who survived because of it. Or, well, there was a long-lasting, long-running story in my family about my grandmother coming back from France, where she was studying in the beginning of the 20th century, and she spent all her inheritance money for this possibility. And so when she came back to Moscow, it was said about her, she arrived with only a hat box. She had nothing but the hat box. And so I have no choice but to imagine her standing there, coming out of a train carriage with this huge hat box that somehow survived all the other memories, including the things she might consider much more significant. But still the hat lives on and the hat box lives on.
This is fascinating, yeah. So the memory of objects, the objects as survivors, and also the dead as participants of this dialogue, who also have to be given dignity and a right to protest, maybe against the way of what we're doing with them. I think this is the moment when I stop with my questions. So I have more, but I will leave it here. And because I already see questions, several questions incoming via Q&A, via so the text questions and also raised hands. So if you would like to ask your questions orally, please just use the raised hand functions and I will see your queue. So I will start with the questions in the Q&A. The first one is to Maria specifically. When you are talking about the rights of the dead or the dignity of the dead, it sounds like Russian laws against falsifying history and some exotic ideas routinely expressed around the Victory Day, like giving voting rights to the fallen in the Great Patriotic War. Obviously different intentions, but the similarity is still striking. Why is it so?
Wow, it is an interesting question because in my humble opinion, what I'm trying to communicate, maybe it is because of my broken English, but still, it is something completely different because what the Russian state and not only the Russian state think of Poland with its brand of newborn laws that are also trying to forbid someone telling something about the participation of the Poles in Holocaust. It is there is the same logic behind all these measures. Someone has an only answer or tries to usurpate the only answer, the only right way of looking at the subject, and to protect this so-called truth he knows from every other option, every other opinion. I am trying to think of some safe space where the facts, faces, and features of history would be allowed to be seen, not being interpreted in this or that way, but simply to exist, to be seen from any possible angle, and still to retain their original dignity. Because in my experience, in my feeling, there is nothing more undignified than the attempts to reenact the dead, as it usually happens in Russia around the Victory Day. We are not the dead, and we are not even the direct outcome of their lives and actions. So I would not, I don't think that it is a right thing to align the living and the dead, and it may lead to some grave consequences, I suppose.
Thank you so much, Maria. So just my question to everyone who would like to ask questions and who is writing them, please write them in English. And yeah, please do write them in advance so I can see how many are coming and can sort of estimate the time that is needed. The next one is from Maria Kapaeva. Warm greetings to you both. Question, how do you think today's digital reality, selfies, millions of images, thousands of emails and texts we share between each other will shape, form and affect our memories about today in the future? how are the digital forms affecting the future?
Well, I've been writing about it a small bit in this book of mine, and I suppose that it is the sole version of a secular immortality contemporary reality is giving us, with all the possible consequences, grim as well as the inviting ones, because we're getting overstuffed with these billions of images. It is hard to, it is getting more and more hard to choose. And the main question that ails me, I cannot exactly picture the viewer, the one who is going to browse through this unlimited library of visual matter.
I think, Katja, would you like to?
Yes. Yeah. I think it impacts also our own research, because in former times, I don't even remember when it was so, in order to research something, in order to gain some information, we were moving from cities to cities, from one archive to another. There was nothing to eat there usually, and so on. Yeah, I remember myself researching in the early 90s in the different Russian archives, and now searching for information, we can sit just on our desk drinking wine, regarding the, I don't know, the barracks of Mauthausen. And it's a very, very strange thing, because we are losing a sort of body sensation, which were usually were connected with process of maturity, process of what's the word for that? Quest. So actually, in order to gain something, you had to be proved yourself, to go through a certain испытание, как будет? A hardship, I don't know, and tests, yeah, and now we are just there, and this belonging doesn't cost anything. The information doesn't cost, so everything is like easy. The point is, what happens when everything is easy? Does it still have the same price? Do we really perceive these fruits on the same level? So that's one of the contemplations. Yeah, actually, I also wrote many things about internet in my book, but
I think therefore this
yeah, yeah, because actually the first chapter in my book, or even its prologue, Google sei Dank, which is hardly translatable into English because it's like thanks God, but Google sei Dank, it's God sei Dank, and it's also alliteration. So this strange connection through internet, yes.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And the next question that's coming in, is there any space where facts can exist without interpretation? That's a question to Maria.
Well, archive, for instance.
Yeah, and you also reflect in your text about these different forms of remembering and relating to the past. Yeah, so narrative versus archive.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, we have many different kinds of archive, starting with the family one and moving to the great gross, multi-purpose, multifaceted, bigger ones. But at the same time, sometimes we are having places, storage places, where facts are simply facts. And when it comes to the words, we're using dictionaries. So archive is a dictionary of facts, dictionary of images, and bottomless source of the possible interpretations, but still you are always able to go back to dig further, to dig deeper.
Yeah, those sort of raw data that you can interpret, but as you also reflect in the text, we tend to interpret them through this given frameworks, which are sort of stuck in our minds, which we are stuck in, and that is the danger of these very convenient interpretations that we're used to. Yes, the next question coming in anonymously. Among the reactions to your writing from readers who read you in translation, has anything struck you as particularly surprising yet perceptive?
Katja, it's your turn.
Нет,
я
стараюсь. Sorry. I think that we talked about memory for so long that I'm now in complete oblivion because I don't remember. So I need some time. Masha,
you can also go to another question, and this is something, if it occurs to you later.
There were many things, many things, but it's already long ago.
Yeah, so if you don't
mind. It wasn't exactly with reading, but while I was traveling across Bulgaria with my book, I was totally smitten with a chance encounter with a direct descendant of a person who was my grandmother's big love, her former boyfriend of the 1910, 1911. And it was totally unexpected. And I suppose that was the best reaction, the best outcome of writing and publishing this book.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Thanks so much. I think that there is a follow-up question comment by Anna Lalua, who asked about facts, but in archives, a great deal of selection is practiced. What to keep and what to forget. I would not agree that they are simple facts.
Yes, Anna, but it already means that you are working with an edited archive, and I was encountering, and not once, but I'm constantly encountering while doing a research on this former book or on the one I'm working at right now, that sometimes in the archives you are seeing, you're encountering the most unpredictable things that no one ever had seen. Sometimes you're getting the documents, letters, pictures, whatever else, going in bundles as a sole archive item. So to be interpreting, of course, calling a number of letters a bundle is also a way of interpreting the facts. And while putting the thing into an archive is also a way of thinking of it, of naming it. But we are going too far, I suppose, in our attempts of defining things. Still, an archive is mainly a storage, not a history, and not an attempt of building a timeline or something of the kind. It is a starting point of research, not research itself.
And probably a fact is a very precarious word also. So it is a word that can be manipulated just like archives are. And indeed, it's a very loaded word. And I think what you are showing in your novel and what you were saying today as well is about being careful and being very precise about how you are dealing with these bits of information. Next question is by Daria Khlivnyuk. Thank you for the fascinating discussion. Memory studies scholars are discussing possible crises of memory, including the right turn in Western Europe and the US. Do you feel that people might lose interest in memory soon, or that it might be reinterpreted with the new political regimes coming to power?
I would say that the new political regimes using memory as a working tool in their company, in their attempts to gain power, is a direct outcome of our common interest in memory, the feeling where this obsession everyone is having. And it would be naive to think that this obsession will be uniting only all the good people. Of course, every thought, every idea is having its dark side, and now we have to be dealing with it. And maybe in a way, not a complete loss of interest towards memory, but a certain evaluation of its possible danger is necessary. It is always important to keep this balance of memory and in sometimes even oblivion.
Thanks a lot. Katja, would you like to respond to this, or shall we go to next question? Next one, yeah? Okay, because I see questions now flowing.
Sorry. I wanted to just to say one word. Actually, we experienced already this time of in exaggerated ideology, or ideology instead of history and all that. And actually the point of resistance in Soviet Union, I wouldn't even call it resistance, but the point of dignity in Soviet Union was to tell the story, to tell the history, to tell the stories about certain historical moments, to keep a memory on certain certain events which were not allowed to mention in the official history. So actually, I think we are not in danger. I think it would be vice versa. I don't know. I don't know, but I only can think about that. The fight for a right memoir would keep going on.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting question, because in the Soviet Union we were having two ways of keeping memory intact: the official story, the big narrative, and a number of different dispersed familial stories that were contradicting the official memory and at the same time coexisting with it. And I suppose, well, there is something, well, too bipolar to my taste in this approach to reality. And in a way, now we're witnessing the outcome. We're having the political reality where people can practice things they would they would deny on a sociology polls or at election points. And so it could be, resistance is a good thing, but it also has its weak points. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting topic for a long discussion.
It's definitely, yeah, so something for both memory studies scholars and all the people working with memory. I think that's a very relevant question, which, yeah, will be coming up in the times ahead. Okay, scrolling down. A question to you both. Is there anyone, is there any writing in a language other than Russian or German or any writer, I guess, is there any writer writing in a language other than Russian or German whose sensibility you would see as particularly close to your own? Someone from outside Europe or inside Europe?
Masha, I believe in you.
Okay, I just wanted to give you, because I'm talking definitely too much. Well, besides German, well, it still seems important to me to name name W.G. Sebald, because it is impossible to talk about post-memorial writing, post-memorial sensibility without naming him. I would be talking, well, of Georgy Gospodinov, for instance, the Bulgarian writer whose Physics of Sorrow is translated into a number of languages. I would be talking, well, it is a book from another shelf, but in a way she's working with documents, with memories, with quotations, and with the dead. I would definitely name Anne Carson in all her capacities, as a poet, as an essay writer, and as a scholar. She's incredible, and her way of dealing with the facts seems to me exemplary.
Katja, what about you?
Well, speaking of poets, Alice Oswald with her book-length poem Memorial, Don Michoy with her amazing latest collection, DMZ Colony, where she is dealing with the reality of the Korean War and the occupation of South Korea afterwards. So yes, it's good to know that we have a great company.
Thanks so much. Yes, so I see a long question, so I'll try to read all of it. A question coming from Anna Halberstadt. I think the work of memory is very important in our times. Berlin and for the former Western Germany at this time seems to be an exception in contemporary territories of bloodlands. In Lithuania, Poland, Ukraine, and Hungary, the denial of the collaboration of the local populations with the Nazi regime is very much alive. Ruta Vanagaite, who wrote a book about the complicity of Lithuanians, who themselves eradicated 95% of their Jewish population, suffered persecution and threats and had to leave the country for 2.5 years. So to me, accuracy of memories is very important in fighting the denial of what happened. It is a way to honor the victims. My question, what does fictionalization of those events do to the changing perceptions of younger generations? Does it create a new paradigm of memory?
I really hardly know what to say, because it's certainly not our way of dealing with these things. We are not fictionalizing anything. And so it's hard for me to answer the question. It's much more important to publish the numbers, to push politicians to talk about this loudly, to create museums where we know what exactly had happened, things like that. But I don't know, maybe I don't understand the question precisely. I mean, there is a book of actually the first and the main book on Babi Yar, written by Anatoly Kuznetsov. And even in this book, there are some circumstances described to which explain why. I mean, they're not really explaining. There is no like casualty in his writing, but he's describing his old grandfather and some people in Iran, and one can understand that he's talking about people who suffered during collectivization. And actually, the book was written in the Soviet time in the 60s, and it was not allowed to talk really freely about Holodomor. But if one read this book carefully, one understands that what actually happened there, yeah. And then the next chapter is Babi Yar, and this young Anatoly, who was, if I'm not mistaken, 11 or 12 years old, he was just a neighbor of Babi Yar, and it's the most important testimony because this catastrophe didn't как это сказать? He couldn't get rid of this memory. So actually, for example, I don't know why everybody reading this book is not mentioning what was actually before. It explains complicity of some or even many Ukrainians in a very paradoxical way, because this concept that part of the commissars during the Holodomor were Jews. I mean, there are facts, yeah, and if local people in villages has never seen Jews before, and they're coming just to take their grain and things like that. Of course, in the next turn, they would do certain things. I mean, it's just a fictionalization of what I'm doing now. But I mean, it has to be explained in a historical context, if it's actually to be explained. So I don't know about literature, but I think there are still something to do on the simplest historical level of facts and yeah.
But literature also does and can do work there, but it's
maybe. But I mean, in the situation when politicians know that, for example, situation in Lithuania, and I mean historians know that Lithuania, Ukraine, and Poland has a certain role, and there are some reasons why, and so it's very important, for example, for politicians to say right words, and there were many moments during the reign of Poroshenko, I almost forgot the name, Poroshenko, to say something, but in his speech in Babi Yar, in the very, very important historical moment when
I think
something happened to the connection.
Katja, you back? Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. I mean, I see it is that actually the most important turn is actually for politicians and not for the literature.
Thanks so much. I see one participant would like to ask his question himself. So I think that will be also a good variation. So Agnan, I'm giving you the microphone.
Agnan Tsvetkov.
Yes, please, you can speak now. Yep.
But we can read. We see the question.
Yeah, maybe it would be easier to write it down.
Yeah, I think, yeah, Agnan, can you speak? Should be able to now.
He writes.
No, he has problems with it.
I just read out his question. Okay. Thank you very much for the exciting conversation. I'd like to ask about the responsibility publishing these two books. Did the authors feel responsible to write these stories because they need a few more personal examples to understand their traumatic past, or were they responsible not telling the full story because the victim's dignity? And because these stories are for the victims and for the survivors at the same time. What do you think about being responsible to the audience who have read your stories?
Well, I would start with defining the term responsibility, because maybe I don't get the question clear enough. But when you are writing a book, and especially your family story, you are not trying to illustrate some point. You are writing a book. You want to tell a story, or maybe a story is wanting to be told with your help. And so you are just writing, you're going where the story leads you, trying to stay conscious, trying not to simplify the story, trying not to modernize it, not to make it a work of fiction, because it is a real story of real people and real flowers or ficuses or whatever. And yes, trying to retain the dignity of subjects and objects. And then you're publishing it because the story wants to be told. And I suppose definitely no one wants to victimize the readers. That was not the point in my case. And in Katja's case, I suppose also she didn't mean to do that. So what does it mean to be responsible? If you mean it in the same mood, then I mean that one has to be conscious while writing. For this, I would sign with both my hands.
Yes. Yes, maybe I can add a few things. I think that we already talked for 2 hours about our responsibility for our own writings, and we also tried to explain the motivation to write. I actually, one of my ideas in writing was, or my concerns was how to write about this violent stories of repressions, because one of actually my main stories in the book and is not on Babi Yar, but on my relative Judah Stern, whose name I really adore. So he is like double Jew, and he tried to kill the German ambassador in the on March 32. So actually, you can imagine his name before the election in Germany in the 32, Judas Stern. So it's a really incredible story, and and I was trying to understand how he was tortured, what actually was going on, and what actually I can see, and what I'm not allowed to see. Always, and there were really many moments in the book. For example, I was trying to find my my grandfather who was captured just not far from Kiev in September 41, and spent the whole war in different prisoner camps for war prisoners. And his last days were in Mauthausen, and not far from Mauthausen. And actually, for me, it was always the question, what I am allowed to see and what I'm not allowed to see, what I'm allowed to tell and what I'm not allowed to tell. Because describing what had happened to them, we are depriving them from dignity for the second time. So I was trying to stand on this threshold, this kind of ethical threshold. And I think for the different people, it's the very different place. So actually, my question was all the time, is how to write about violence, to keep the story of violence and not to multiply the violence. So what is the way to write on all these subjects and not to ruin your own soul and the soul of readers? And where is this actually border, and why I'm doing all that? And so it was always a sort of very, very small path between to be broken and to be pathetic, to be over emotional and to be too rude. and not sensitive enough. So actually, it's really you're asking about responsibility, and it's exactly the question. Maybe responsibility is not the correct word, but I think that the main point is to find this kind of intonation or certain sound. I don't know, and we are our own camerton. I don't know the word in English. So you're always like, and it's not a very easy process, I would say. So sometimes you're not sure you're coming back and all that. So everybody knows that. Everybody knows that.
Yeah, I think that speaks really beautifully. This balancing act that your text and Maria's text do, walking this tightrope between saying more and at the same time not too much to stay responsible and to stay careful, as you said.
This word chastity, yeah, it's really very interesting thing. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I find this amazing. Absolutely, this balancing act, and also in the story of your grandfather. So the last chapter in the book, yeah, how you move between this documentary search for facts, conveying that sensibility and that sense of working with archives and trying to find out what you don't know. And
can I say one more word, because Masha was talking about dignity of that, and I wanted to say something for dignity of nowadays. And actually it was a great concern for me when I was traveling through Austria looking for my grandfather, who spent 4 years somewhere there, actually in 40s. So I was like, you know, and I'm not German, so I haven't been spending like month and month in Austria, making vacations in the mountains. So it was almost my first time in Austria in this beautiful landscape. So actually I was asking myself, is this landscape a part of my story and a part of the story of my grandfather? So what is the question? Should I reduce the reality of my own life just because I'm searching here for my grandfather? So actually I'm doing some sort of reduction or repression of my own view in order to keep dignity of my grandfather, or vice versa. He brought me here, so I have to enjoy. And so actually it's a big question. So what is actually the dignity of research, and what kind of, and actually everything is just search for genre, for a proper form to tell about your contemplation and your experience.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks so much. That's really thought-provoking. I think also for those of us who do research, who work with this information and data and observation and everything around us, and with our own experiences and perceptions being brought into this whole cocktail. So how do we give it a form? What kind of form? And I think as we're nearing the end of discussions, I don't want to tie you out with too many questions, but there is one question I think I would like to ask, is this is what you are working on right now. And as you're writing, I know this is a very banal and question, but I think it's might be interesting for many listeners. Is your writing affected by your experience producing and presenting your books about memory? How has this experience influenced what you're working on now?
Masha will answer for the both.
Masha will hesitate for the both. So I'm working right now. I'm working at a couple of articles that are long overdue. So I'm all guilty, and all I can think of is writing them to the point and then forgetting it.
Sure.
You're so humble. Actually, I'm now preparing the book which contains my columns. I was writing on photography for the last 5 years, a small column in the newspaper. So regarding absolutely different types of photography, and I was trying to simulate the normal person. So I'm writing not as an artist. I'm not writing as a scholar. So it was like a sort of yes, and I tried to choose a few columns and to publish them. But there is one question which really concerns me, and I saw it in Zoom webinar in chat. The big fiction is Ukraine in this story, or history between German and Russian narration. I see. So, but I don't really understand if it's a question or not. I would really love to answer this, but it's something which very I don't know, it makes me very sad because I don't really understand. It's a sort of very blaming a note.
Well, that's why I didn't read it out.
Okay. because it's a big concern if things we are talking about now are perceived like that. I really don't know what to do. That's the point.
Yes, so yeah, I see also the note looking at the chat that we should really wrap up our conversation now. Thank you so much. So for your wonderful, brilliant thoughts, reflections, which add to your text, which add another layer to this anyway, absolutely fascinating and also very relevant reading in our times. I hope to see you on other occasion, and thanks to everyone who joined the conversation. I hope you enjoyed it.
Ksenia, thank you very much for this beautiful moderation.
Thank you so
thank
much.
you all the silent interlocutors.
Thank you all.
Thank
Bye.
you. Justina! Wow!